The first presentation is going to be by Merindi Swadling, and it's titled Celebrating Adversity. And Merindi Swadling is a second-generation Urantia book reader. She lives in Wollongong in Australia. She's married to a long-time reader, Bernie Belasky, and has two young daughters, Rose and May. She served as the vice president of the association between 2007 and 2014, and is currently serving on the governance committee of the association. She also was on a committee for the association's international conference that was hosted in Sydney in 2006. And she lives a very busy professional life, working as a senior leader in the banking and finance sector. She holds a master in business administration, and in her spare time, she enjoys socializing with her friends and family. So with that introduction, I'd like to hand you over to Merindi, and she's going to present Celebrating Adversity.
Thank you, Trevor. That was a lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. Very nice to see you all. I'm actually surprised at the sheer volume of people that are on the Zoom call. I was kind of expecting at this time of the afternoon in Australia we'd have 20 or 30 people. So you made me a little nervous now with the number of people on the call. But I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk about celebrating adversity. I want to share a few personal stories and really just look at. I guess the topic is pretty hot for me right now, as probably many of you on this call globally. I think there's a lot of struggle happening at the moment. There's a lot of adversity happening across the globe. For various reasons, and I just think it's heightened. You know, some of us are tired, some of us are sick, some of us are struggling financially, some of us are, you know, socially isolated and really not coping very well with that isolation. And I wanted to bring back adversity and look at it more from a celebration, and look at it more for sort of what does it mean to our eternal career, and the importance of it, and the beauty in it, and the value that adversity can bring to us as individuals, and our future career. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got some slides if I can figure it out. Okay, so Trev gave me an introduction, but yes, I'm a second generation reader. This is a nice little map of Australia if you're not familiar with Australia. We live in Wollongong, which is about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours south of Sydney, in New South Wales. So it's a beautiful part of the world. It's very windy today and it's very cold. So we're in the middle of our winter. And as Trevor mentioned, I'm a second generation reader. So here's some shots just of us. I think the one in the top left corner was one of our strategic planning days for Anzura, or maybe we're planning the conference back in 2006. And there's an image there of my family. So Bernie and I are celebrating our anniversary today. We got married 12 years ago. So we are having double celebration today. And my young daughters, Rose and May. So that's a little picture of who I am. And I wanted to talk about like why adversity and my experience with adversity. And sometimes I guess I'm just going to share two fairly significant stories and events that have happened to our family over the last 2 years. And it kind of got me thinking this week when I was preparing for this presentation, you know, my stories are fairly insignificant when I think about, you know, the trauma of losing a child, or the trauma of losing your partner, or some of the events that can happen to humans. And what happened to us is obviously not that extreme, but it was still two very significant experiences in our family's journey that were painful and that hurt, and took a lot of depth of our inner spirit to sort of get through those experiences. And it sort of made me realize that no matter, it's very relative, right? So if you experience something that is painful or that is traumatic, it's not always wise to compare it to other people. You have to, it's relative to who you are, and I guess your experiences and your ability to cope with that. So the first, I guess the first event was almost exactly 2 years ago in September 2018. Our eldest daughter, who was 8 years old at the time, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And this rocked us and slammed us very hard. It came out of nowhere. It was unexpected. We had no idea why she was sick. And her diagnosis was a huge change for her, and a huge event for our family. So I guess, I'm not going to talk too much, but type 1 diabetes is commonly appears in childhood. It used to be called juvenile diabetes, and it essentially the pancreas or the part of the pancreas that produces insulin shuts down. So it's an autoimmune disease, and the autoimmune system attacks the pancreas and no longer produces insulin. So what does that mean day to day? She has to inject herself with insulin, and she injects herself with insulin when she eats. She injects herself, well, now she wears a pump, so the insulin pump delivers that insulin to her all day long. And we have to tightly control and tightly monitor her blood glucose level. So there's sort of a range that is a healthy range that we aim to keep her in. If she goes too high, it can cause long-term issues, health issues, and we bring it down with insulin. If she goes too low, it can be life-threatening in the moment, and we bring it up with sugar. So that's where you've got type 1 diabetics having juice and jelly beans and all that sort of thing. So there's this kind of 24/7 monitoring of her glucose levels. That when this happened to us, obviously there's a huge learning curve, and we're 2 years down the track now, and it's kind of BAU for us now in our life. But it was big, it was huge at the time, and watching your child go through something like that is very painful as a parent. For me personally, it came at the same time as I was finishing my master's. So I was in that final 6 weeks of finishing my master's degree, and I was in the middle of a research project, and I was writing my thesis and all sorts of, I already had a lot happening in my life. I already was stretched for time, and this on top of it was huge. And it taught me, I guess, in hindsight and in reflection, it taught me about the capacity of humans, the capacity of the human spirit, how much we can actually cope with. You might think, I can never fit one more thing in my life, or I could never deal with that. But in actual fact, and especially, I guess, as a parent, sometimes you have no choice but to deal with this. So that was that story. And then 2 years later, this is at the start of COVID, so in March, Bernie, again, very unexpectedly and gave us a bit of a blind side, but Bernie had to have open heart surgery. So Bernie had a triple bypass, coronary artery bypass in March this year. And I remember it very clearly. It was the 17th of March, which was 5 days before the school shut down and the kids were at home homeschooling. It was right in that final sort of week and a half where things were changing daily here in Australia and globally as well. But we were moving towards lockdown, and everything was shutting, and there was obviously a whole lot of stuff happening in the community. To have Bernie in hospital having open heart surgery was traumatic. It was, obviously it's traumatic for him. It was a huge experience he went through. But for me personally, just dealing with the logistics of life and looking after the children and visiting him in hospital, and then he came out of hospital and the girls were homeschooling, and it was a hard period. It was a hard 2-week period, and then obviously the couple of months afterwards in recovery. I captured a little thing off the internet there about a little boy talking about homeschooling and how it's not going well. And if any of you on the call had experienced homeschooling, it was really tough. It was very hard. So So for me, having Bernie also recovering from his heart surgery was trying to work. I was working full time, and all the other normal aspects of life was an event for us. So I wanted to share those stories because now I can reflect, and now I look back and you know, now I see them for the value they had to me and the personal growth that I experienced, I guess, going through those types of events. So I wanted to look at the Urantia book and what does it say about adversity. In my very early time with the Urantia book, in my 20s, the Urantia moda were probably one of the first things that really resonated for me and resonated in my life. I've plucked out 3 of them here. You know, which talk to adversity and talk to difficulties. So difficulties may challenge mediocrity and defeat the fearful, but they only stimulate the true children of the Most Highs. And then again, number 12, the greatest affliction of the cosmos is never to have been afflicted. Mortals only learn wisdom by experiencing tribulation. And then number 16, you cannot perceive spiritual truth until you feelingly experience it. And many truths are not really felt except in adversity. And you know, this starts to give the inkling of what I'm talking about, that the stimulation and the growth and the value of being afflicted, of having adversity, of going through troubles, it's really critical to who we are in our eternal career. It's probably one of the most critical things, and to never have been afflicted is described as the greatest affliction of the cosmos. When you, my next slide talks about the inevitabilities, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but again, it's looking at, is courage, strength of character desirable? Then must man be reared in an environment which necessitates grappling with hardships and reacting to disappointments? Is hope, the grandeur of trust, desirable? Then human existence must constantly be confronted with insecurities and recurrent uncertainties. And is pleasure, the satisfaction of happiness, desirable? Then must man live in a world where the alternative pain and the likelihood of suffering are ever-present experiential possibilities. These are my 2 daughters a few years ago contemplating the ocean. I've got a couple of slides here that are pulled out of paper 26, and you know, the flavour of this is scattered throughout the Urantia book, and I've probably mainly focused on paper 26 because that's the paper I was reading at the time last week when I started pulling some of this together. But paper 26, it talks about the final, the traversing the Havona circle. So that final stage in our journey when we're moving towards paradise. So our final stretch towards the attainment of paradise. And I've got all my all my video on top of that. I can't read it, but hang on a sec. So these ascendant children of time have learned to feast upon uncertainty, to fatten upon disappointment, to enthuse over apparent defeat, to invigorate in the presence of difficulties, to exhibit indomitable courage in the face of immensity, and to exercise unconquerable faith when confronted with the challenge of the inexplicable. Long since, the battle cry of these pilgrims became, in liaison with God, nothing, absolutely nothing is impossible. And I mean, if that doesn't motivate you to enjoy challenges and to enjoy adversity and to enthuse and fatten upon them and invigorate and show courage, like it's an inspiring message that pulls out in this quote. I don't think we're there yet. I'm not personally there yet. I don't go through an experience of pain and find a whole bunch of invigoration and smiles. There's probably far more tears than there are smiles. But this is our final journey. This is where we're heading to. Oh, hang on, sorry. So this slide, again, the same paper, and it's referring to the pilgrims who fail. I mean, this is sad when you read this paper and you hear about, you hear about all the things they've done. They get to that final step, and they actually fail in their first attempt to attain paradise. And they've just encountered their greatest disappointment, and in no way differing from the long list of such experiences whereon they climbed as on a ladder from chaos to glory, except in its magnitude. So they liken this sort of final greatest disappointment as being the same as everything else, except much, much bigger. And I guess, you know, I often use this analogy of the ladder when we're talking, or I'm describing the eternal career to people. It really is, you know, we are at the bottom rungs of that ladder now, and it's really just one step at a time. One, you know, layer upon layer upon layer that we move through this eternal career, and our soul grows through these experiences. And it's a nice image to think about stepping up that ladder from chaos to glory. This is my grandfather. He's such a beautiful man. This is my mum Kathleen's father, who we called Bumps. But this quote is about many of the pilgrims who at such a time look back upon the long, long struggle with a joyous envy, really wishing they might somehow go back to the worlds of time and begin it all over again. Just as you mortals in approaching advanced age sometimes look back over the struggles of youth and early life and truly wish you might live your lives once over again. So it's a beautiful quote. This is about obviously that final journey in the Havona circles. They look back on the struggle, the long, long struggle, and you know, they wish they could do it again, or they're envious of not being there still. So then I've pulled out a few quotes about Jesus. What does Jesus say about adversity? When the flood tides of human adversity, selfishness, cruelty, hate, malice, and jealousy beat about the mortal soul, you may rest in assurance that there is one inner bastion, the citadel of the spirit, which is absolutely unassailable. At least this is true of every human being who has dedicated the keeping of his soul to the indwelling spirit of the eternal God. So again, you know, it's really about that inner, the fragment of God that's within all of us. We can go through this adversity and selfishness and cruelty and hate, and we can be rest assured that inner bastion, that, you know, our fragment, our adjuster fragment inside of us is unassailable. Believing the gospel will not prevent getting into trouble, but it will ensure that you shall be unafraid when trouble does overtake you. If you dare to believe in me and wholeheartedly proceed to follow after me, you shall most certainly, by so doing, enter upon the sure pathway to trouble. I do not promise to deliver you from the waters of adversity, but I do promise to go with you through all of them. And I put this image here. That's you, Trevor, actually, walking through the sand. Years ago, I took a photo of Trevor's footsteps in the sand because he has a habit of dragging his big toe behind him as he walks down the beach, which is very endearing. But this quote reminded me of that beautiful poem, that Footprints poem, where, you know, we're walking along and God is walking next to us, and lots of troubles and difficulties that occur in our life, and I can't remember the exact quote, the exact poem, but it's really about, why did you abandon me at those times? And his response, I didn't abandon you, I carried you. And so, you know, the knowledge that through all these troubles and through all this adversity, Jesus is there and he's going through them with us. So I wanted to finish, and then we'll have some questions and maybe sharing of other stories. But I wanted to invite Bernie. So this is a Nautilus concept that I want Bernie to talk about, mainly because he introduced me to the Nautilus, and the context of when he was sharing this story with me was more about my professional work and career, and some of the, it's a few years ago now, but it really rang true for me, and I think it's relevant to what we're talking about today. So I'll let Bernie talk about it. And there's a quote here. There's a quote here from Wikipedia, which is really really just a description of how the Nautilus matures and what the creature inside this beautiful shell does over time. So I'll invite Bernie.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening around the world. It's been a pretty amazing set of conditions we've been faced with this last 6 months for sure. In the Urantia book, there's a word that's italicized 7 times. And if you have any curiosity to what it is, it's the word suddenly. So we have a condition now where suddenly, without any forewarning whatsoever really, life has completely taken a back step, taken a side step, a reversal, however it affects you in particular. What was yesterday is no longer today. So the consequences of what's going on in the world around us force us to appease the thought adjuster, to think about what we need to do to adjust and to adapt to the conditions. And so, as Merindi mentioned to you that I went through that harrowing experience of having your breastbone cut open, and it was pretty harrowing all around. So I was forced to deal with courage straight away, because they have you sign a paper that says, well, you know, things might not work out, you may not survive this, but we're going to go ahead with it anyway. So right then and there, you're pretty much faced with your own mortality. Anyway, I'd like to express this story about the Nautilus. And I've clung to this idea for probably a better part of 30 years, that in the course of our life, we make a choice and we make a decision. And in the hatching of that idea and the execution of a plan, you have to go through the beginning, the middle, and the end. And so with this Nautilus creature, I found inspiration in that if you look at it, and this is no exact science or anything, but each chamber appears to be exactly double of what it used to be. So if you think of your life as a series of these decisions, when you make a decision, there's a beginning, and it's all fresh, and it's exciting, and it's new, and it's unexplored, and you have lots of adaptation ahead to accommodate what's going on. And so I like to think of it as breaking into a brand new chamber, and you have the breath and the space around you, and it's all fresh and it's all new. And it reminds me of that statement of Jesus, who said quite succinctly that, "Behold, I will make all things new again." So in the event that we are going to have 480 physical transformations until we're a perfect spirit, I'd have to say that literally all things will be made new again. And like this Nautilus, when you start your journey, as I said before, it's all fresh and new and exciting and interesting. And then you get to the middle part of your experience in this chamber, where everything is comfortable now, you're well adjusted, things are going along smoothly, you've made all the proper choices, you can see in front of you quite well, and you're just in a really comfortable position about where you stand. And then as time goes on, as we all know, nothing ever stands still or tarries with yesterday, as the master was fond of saying, that you come up against the pressures of change and the consequences of needing to adapt yet even further. So like, tearing of your skin, like ripping through a tough wall or tearing down some bricks or something rigid, you're faced with this innumerable task of breaking through into a new part of the chamber. And during that transition time, where you're forcing yourself to make a new choice and to change direction and to find a new rhythm, and all of this consequence of this inspiration of the thought adjuster in your soul, you're just consistently in a state of flux. And then once again, when that moment finally takes place and you break through and you can see quite clearly a new vision, that once again, it's all new and it's all fresh, and hey, everything's great again, and I feel inspired and I'm ready to go. And so I like to think of this Nautilus creature as a continuum of our life. And that's why I brought it to the table today. Thank you.
Dal. So that's all from us. I'm happy to take some questions. I'm happy for others to share their adversity stories, or yeah, however we might want the next 20 minutes to flow.
Yeah, if anyone wants to ask a question, put your hand up. Stuart?
Okay, we got it. Thank you. Merindi, may I say, I was really touched with your personal, sober sharing with what you went through on your disappointments and the challenges that you had as a parent, as a loving mother, everything that went on inside you. These are the critical moments of our lives that are critical and impact us on so many different levels, and not just us, but the people you love as well. I really was touched by that. I wanted to say, you had the quote, and my first few readings of the Urantia book many decades ago, every time I read it, that quote, it just sort of gave me a cringe, and that's fatten on disappointment, to embrace suffering. And I kept saying to myself, I don't see any way I can logically embrace suffering. Right now, I back off suffering like a hot stove that I don't want to get burnt on. And I couldn't understand how you can do that. But then I figured it out. And they don't tell us, but it is available to our consciousness. And that is, when we go through, and what you went through, it changes you, but it does something else. You have conquered and overcome the worst fear that a mother can have. You have been participant in love and sober clarity of cosmic sanity to deal with the situation. You're never going to have to go through that again in that way. You have conquered it. You have transcended the fattening of the disappointment. And I think that's where I learned I can embrace disappointment. Because when it happens, and the worst things can, and all of us, we're all part of the dance. Every one of us has suffered. But we have overcome. We are survivors. And now we share it together like this. So I just want to thank you so much. I had to get that out right away. I wanted you to hear it. Thank you, Merindi, very much.
Oh, thank you, Stuart. That's very kind. And I think you're 100% right. And I think that quote is talking about pilgrims when they are traversing the Havona circles, and that is a long way from here, and we have a long journey to get to that point. So I think for us to expect ourselves to really fatten on that disappointment, and right now, you know, we can't be that hard on ourselves. You know, it's not where we can be right now, but we can definitely strive for that, and I think we do through these experiences, and you know, it's about everything. We're striving to be perfect, right? We're striving for that perfection, and knowing that every little step on the ladder, every little step along the way every little experience is building on the experience before it. Everything that you are doing, all your choices, your decisions, you know, your interactions with other humans is part of that story and part of that journey, and we have to go through it. And you think, and you're right, like I've never been through, when that happened to my daughter, I've never had that type. I had beautiful, lovely, healthy kids, no problem in the world. And it really asked me to draw on my inner spirit and my strength of God inside me and adjuster inside me to really get through that experience. And you do, because you have to, because they're your child, and you have to, obviously, like there's no choice. There was no choice for me to make. Do I help my daughter survive or not? It was not a choice, but the experience, I'd never had to face that before. But you're right, now I have, and now I know that I'm capable, and I know the capacity of my inner self, of my mind, of my body, of my everything that makes up who I am. I know that I'm capable of that. So hopefully I won't have to do it again, though. That's not.
Marvin's got his hand up there. Go ahead, Marvin.
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for launching into this subject. I think it's we don't talk about it often enough, but it's tremendously rich area of exploration for us. And you know, I come from a therapist background, so I mean, I've, for 40 years, traveled through these stretches for people, and but they're some of the passages you shared, Merindi, I think were outstanding. The one that caught me this time was when they're speaking of these candidates for paradise residency, and they have to attain the last of the Trinity, the Father, and they fail in that endeavor. They find, and they say it's through no fault of their own. Usually, it's related to their history and their origin. But the disappointment is so profound, and they have to go back to a previous rung on the ladder and go through some things again, and they get special help. Mm. But I can't imagine the disappointment of having climbed all the way to paradise and then have to go back. I think they say to one of the super universes that they haven't been to get some supplemental experience. Mm. And what struck me was that they described this as the last in the long list of such experiences. And you know, what was a little unsettling for me is I guess I'm used to thinking of this as the hardest place and it's going to get easier. And I don't think that's the case. I think we get stronger, but I think things actually probably get harder and more challenging in some ways. And the other part of what occurred to me as you were speaking is, you know, there's the other facet or the other part of this experience of encountering hardship. And that is when we do come around and we rise and we ask for help and we get the help and we develop the new muscles and the new courage and stamina or whatever it is spiritually, we come out to be much more than we were before. And I want to look back at, you know, the difficult times I've been through. It's been true every time, you know, and so getting to this place where I can look at one of these times, and I look at what's happening with COVID, you know, I look at what's happening in our movement and among other people I know who are spiritual servants in the interfaith movement and friends, etc., family, and the kinds of strengths that are developing in response to this adversity are really fascinating. Opportunities to grow and develop, like for instance, with what we're doing here, that never would have occurred except for these circumstances. And I think of when they describe that war has resulted in some of the greatest and most rapid advancements in human civilization because of the stressors it places on us and what we have to do to cope. We grow in these remarkable ways. And so, you know, finally coming around to a place where when I encounter some of these circumstances, part of me can look to the other side of it and say, I know there's something that's going to come out of this that's great. And I've just got to have faith in that and walk the steps with the Spirit and ask for the help and just step up and respond in anticipation of growth that I know will come out of it. So it's such a fascinating phenomenon to go through. It's just fascinating. And I want to say again, I so much appreciate your bringing up this subject and allowing us to consider it more fully.
Thank you, Marvin. And 100% I agree with you. I think there is, I think this is easy compared to what's to come. And, you know, that's exciting too, right? Like even in all of its difficulties, I think there's some excitement there and imagination. The other aspect I was also going to say, which I didn't put into my presentation because it's not quite connected, but in this same paper, it describes the meeting of the ascending suns and the descending suns, and it talks about you know, just the envy or it's envy really, the personalities in the universe who are descending and haven't come up that ladder from chaos to glory. They haven't gone through the struggles, the long struggles. They wish they had, or they want to, and so I guess there's it's just, I find the whole thing very reassuring and very empowering to get through what we're currently going through, knowing knowing the good that's going to come out of it, knowing the growth and the importance of it in the long journey.
Hey, does anyone else have any questions? Kathleen's got her hand up there.
I'd like to say something. That was great, Merindi. That was just really, really good. And having been through that journey with you as the grandparents, I know exactly whereof she speaks. But what was going through my mind, just as you've all been talking, is just how, just as we go through our difficulties now, and you think back to your childhood and the sort of difficulties you went through in your teenage years, and you know, every step of your life, the difficulties that you've overcome and grown and become better for, it's really not going to be any different all the way to paradise. So it's almost like everything we learn now is great. I think this is where the celebration of adversity is, that even though it's painful and hard when you go through it, when you can come out the other side and realize, gee, I survived that, you know, you sort of feel kind of like you want to pat yourself on the back or something, because wow, I'm still here. I got through it. And yet you look back and think, look, it wasn't really that hard, because at the time I just did what I had to do. You know, you do this automatically and you're not really even thinking about it. You don't have time to whinge about it. Occasionally I heard the comments of why us and why me, and particularly from Rose, why did it happen to me? And that's very normal and that's very valid, because you do wonder, well, what have I done to deserve this? But you know, you get over that and you just have to get on with living, and that's what we're here for. So I just see each one of these lessons as the celebration of our finite career. It's like, get used to it. It's going to keep happening, but you'll handle it. And certainly with faith and with our spiritual lives, I mean, that's just brilliant what that's given us in order to be able to have the faith that this too will pass, you know, and we'll get there. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kathleen. I see Christian Birch has got his hand up there. There he is, Menz.
Hi, Christian.
Andy and Bernie and everybody. Wow, I didn't realise all that had happened. That's huge things to go through. Wow. And then you went straight into the whole COVID thing. I was thinking of that verse, you know, what does it say? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And it's like, I found, I remember when I was young once, and I went on a school tramping trip, and I thought I was fit, but I wasn't, and we had to get to where we were going, and I remember that I was so exhausted. I just had to concentrate and look at my feet and take each step. It's all I thought. If I just focus on my feet and get through this journey, I'll be okay. And I got to a point on this mountain where I stopped for a breather and looked around, and the view was actually quite beautiful. And I thought, wow. And I kind of, when I went up the mountain a bit more, I kind of had this thing in my heart, and I thought, well, it's going to be a better view when I get a bit higher. And so I just thought, all I have to do is look at my feet and concentrate on getting up this mountain. And I know it seems really strange, and there was a few comments before where you kind of think, wow, is this going to go on like for a long, long time, even until almost the end? Is there ever a chance? But I think it's kind of balanced of the hard times where our faith looks back on our lives and we go, well, it was okay. We got through the hard bit and the view got better. And often when you look back, especially for those people that are older, when you look back over your life and the experiences, you kind of realize that we would never be where we are today unless those things had happened, you know. And so it kind of gives you faith to carry on the journey. But I think certainly in our eternal lives, there are moments of great beauty. There are moments when you realize, you know, it's my will that your will be done. It's my will that I get up this mountain. It's been your will that you get through these times. You know, you've had to go through them, and they sound really hard, especially with what Bernie went through. That just sounded like, whoa. But I think what it does teach us, because it says that our lives aren't going to be easy. Now that we've joined up for the mission, it's certainly not going to be easy. But it's like there are those moments where I think we worship because we have the view of the adversity that we've been through. And it does train us. And we do need to be trained when we get to the end of the journey. But anyway, my heart goes out to both you and Bernie and the girls, and I'm sending you my love and a big hug.
Thank you, Christian. I love that concept of the view, because I really do think, and I mean, it's scattered throughout the Urantia book, right? You can read quotes everywhere, but there's plenty of support and there's plenty of rest along the way. So we are going through more and more and struggles and harder, but we're resting, and we have reversion, and we have plenty of worship, and we have all sorts of help that we are enjoying it, and we're enjoying the view as we go. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yeah, Chris has got one. Go ahead, Chris.
Merindi, you talk a lot about your family life, obviously, and your long history with the Urantia book. I'm wondering about your professional life and how the Urantia book has influenced your professional dealings and job life in general.
That's a good question, Chris. I've been a people leader since I was 21 years old, so it's a long time ago now that someone in their wisdom put me in charge of a team and called me a supervisor, and I guess I led into that back then and have just grown over the years, and I always find what am I trying to say? So being a leader and being an inspiring leader is really about the people and the development of the people that are in your remit or that are in your team. And I feel the Urantia book has given me a real love of people. Like I remember back in my early 20s about understanding or really knowing and learning that there's a thought adjuster in every single person, and knowing that there's a fragment of God in every single person. It helped me back then form my real passion and joy for people and appreciation for people in all of their diversity. So I think I've been a good leader because I really genuinely care about my team. But now, now I'm in my sort of mid to late 40s, and it's a long time, and I'm a fairly senior leader now. I have a fairly big role, and so the people is still a big part of me, but obviously, there's a lot of business commercial stuff that I've grown into and I've evolved, and just having the Urantia book in parallel to that or along with that is it's who I am, really. It's made me who I am. So I don't think I weave the Urantia book into my professional life. I think I must because it's who I am, but I don't consciously do it if that's the answer, or if that's an answer. But look, I mean, I am a good leader. I've been a leader for a long time, and I think I probably will be a leader till the day I retire or even beyond. And I genuinely think that's because of my love of people. William's got his hand up.
Look, on the subject of the influence of the teaching, the Urantia teachings on professional life, I'm reminded of a presentation which Merindi's young brother gave at a recent conference which the Canberra Study Group organised. When was it? Last year, I think, last September. And he gave a presentation which was very clearly articulated, virtually about how he was using his understanding of the Urantia book in his professional life. He was doing, is he a project organiser or something? I can't remember. But I was very impressed with this. It was a very direct application of his understanding to his working life, and I thought that was extremely interesting.
Yeah, it was. I remember that. Yeah, it's a hard question, Chris. I've never really thought that deeply about it. Andrew obviously thinks a lot about it. He did a presentation around it and how he applies his understanding of the Urantia book to his professional life. But I find I find when it is who you are, it becomes who you are, it flows out in everything, all your decisions and all your view of life, your lens of what you're doing in your life is so wrapped up in the teachings of the Urantia book, it becomes who you are, for me.
Okay, we've got Ian Ismore, I think. Did you wave your hand, Ian?
I did, yes. I just pressed the space bar to unmute me. No, but Merindi, you're a product of a second generation because your parents were one of the first Urantia readers in Oz, and you were immersed in it since you were a little toddler. So that's just part of the growing process. Good on you.
Yeah, that's 100%, Ian. I think that's sometimes why I think that's just who I am, because it was who I was. I often tell stories about sitting on the side when study groups were going on, or asking questions, or it wasn't even until I was sort of 24, 25 years old that I even felt I had a need to read the Urantia book, because I kind of thought I knew it anyway. And obviously I didn't. And when I did read it myself, there was a lot more to it than what I learned by osmosis in the household. But yeah, I think it is definitely who we were as a family, and yeah. We were very fortunate, and I've got children now, obviously, so third generation readers, and I try and weave that flavour of the Urantia book teachings, Bernie and I both do, into how we bring up the girls, and I think it has to be a natural part of your household.
I was thinking when you're talking about the teachings of the book when in your professional life, William and Merindi, I just remember when you guys were little and teenagers, you know, we had the Urantia book, and I was in a very stressful job and a very stressful position and had to work full time and travel into town, long commuting hours and lots of stress. And I look back on those years and think, gee, what would I have done without the Urantia book? Because I just felt that getting up every day and having to go and face what I was doing, and I was also doing a lot of Urantia work. We were doing a lot of organising conferences and starting up the association and getting books into libraries, and then we opened up a Urantia Foundation office, and you know, it was just constantly in our spare time was Urantia work and having our study groups as well as family. But the job aspect of it was like that was just getting in the way of what I really wanted to do with my life. But at the same time, when I was there, of course, I gave it everything I've got, and I was fairly conscientious with it all. But it really was the Urantia book that helped me cope with just trying to achieve all the, you know, it's just juggling balls. You're just constantly juggling different balls all the time, and I seem to be still doing that. But I think that's what's there. It's the strengthening and the, you know, being able to pray for strength and being able to see your fellow man as not your enemy, but as your friend and as your brother, and yeah, just that philosophy in your life is, I mean, it's probably stating the obvious and preaching to the choir here, but I found it was extremely helpful in my professional life.
Yes, and I think it was very helpful as parents with adolescent children too. It was a great source of comfort.
We survived Merindi growing up.
We did, yes.
So I have a question. Merindi, what would you say is the one thing that, the one, the two, or the three things that your parents did or did not do that facilitated you picking up the book on your own?
I think they did a pretty good job of teaching us about the teachings of the book. I felt I didn't have a need to read it to be. I think back to my 20s and sitting down, and I thought the Urantia book and the Urantia book community, once I hit my early 20s or late teens, were a bunch of old folk that I didn't need to have anything to do with, and you know, there was kind of that's my parents' thing, and that's not for me. So even though, you know, I had a love of God and I carried that through, and I have you know, a strong appreciation for the Urantia book and its teachings, I didn't at that time feel like I wanted to get involved in it. And actually it was my trip to, so Mum and Trevor were working in Chicago at the time. This is in the mid-90s, the late 90s, and I was visiting them in Chicago and met Chris and met Mike and met Severin and met a whole bunch of other second generation readers and younger readers who were all my age. And it was probably that experience that really springboarded me into okay, I better read this thing, and I better know what know whereof I speak. So that was probably the motivation back in those days to actually start reading.
That's interesting. Second
I think
generation.
about my brother's experience. Oh, thank you. I think about my brother's experiences because they have sort of different stories, different personal journeys. My older brother, he read from a very young age, so he was reading, you know, he was reading as a teenager and all the way through. And then my younger brother, he kind of, I don't know, I think he was forced into it because the rest of the family were talking about something he didn't know, and he tried to debunk it, I think, was his journey. He kind of like, all right, you guys are a bunch of idiots, I better read this thing so I can fight with you about it or confront you on it. And obviously that didn't happen, and he became a strong reader ever since. So we all have our own different journeys with it, I think. Even, you know, I don't think we can assume second generation, just children of Urantia books readers are going to read the Urantia book. I think, you know, that's the
Most don't.
Most don't, that's right, yeah.
Okay.
I thank you all for the opportunity. I'm at the hour now, so I'll hand back over to Trev. But yeah, I enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Minz. That was wonderful.